Welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new here. So today I want to talk about Trisha Paytas. Now I did a poll on Instagram and I was surprised that people voted for Trisha. I'm excited because it was the topic that I initially wanted to talk about. The other topic that you could vote on was Britney Spears getting slapped. I'm going to use slapped because the other word might get me blocked. So I might do a video on that at some point. It's a little bit tricky because she obviously has a lot of trauma and it's kind of hard to tiptoe around that. Trisha Paytas, it actually goes really well in line with the last video that I did, which was obviously on the Colleen situation. So let's get right into it. So if you don't know who Trisha Paytas is, you probably have not been deep in the YouTube drama of things in the last more than a decade at this point. She is definitely an icon. Like, love her or hate her. Like, you can say whatever you want about her, but she made a career out of trolling. And I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, she worked her butt off to get to where she is today. And I know a lot of people make fun of her for being like very spendy and all of that, but if you grew up like her, which is very similar to how I grew up, like my parents replaced quality time with presents, it can really, really easily lead you down the path of shopping addiction. So let's go back a little bit. So Trisha was one of the first OGs on the platform from what I can remember. She's been making videos for a very long time. I think she's uploaded daily or almost daily. She has a lot of videos. And in the very beginning of her career, most of them were very trolling kind of videos. She was playing this dumb blonde role that was very, very in the early 2000s, 2010s, just as like bimbo persona. And I think she's kept it up a little bit. We can sometimes still see it come out in some of her videos, but I think she's definitely evolved since then. I actually personally think that Trisha is incredibly smart. Much, much smarter than people give her credit for. And even though I incredibly disagree with a lot of things that she said and a lot of things that she's done, I always got good energy from her. Like, I always felt she would be maybe a fun person to be friends with just as a person. And I think she just did herself a huge disservice by exploiting her trauma, exploiting her life in this way just to become famous and become somebody. Although I do understand where this comes from. We're gonna get into that. But I still think at the core of it, she is a good person. Now, we do see this very much now so that she had her child. But I do want to say that if you are someone who has been hurt by the things that she said and she's done, and you have decided to not forgive her, even though she objectively changed, that's okay. You are very, very much entitled to feel the way you feel, to still be upset, to still want to hold her accountable, because and I've seen this in another video about another creator where there was this talk about, well, I've done this 10 years ago, so you can't be upset about it anymore. You can't be upset with me because I've changed. But if the discovery of the things that have hurt them is brand new to them, they still have a right to be upset about that. So if you see a video where Trisha was saying something or doing something that was triggering to you, even though it was years ago for her, does not mean that you don't have the right to be upset about it today, say something about it today. And I do think she understands that to some degree, but on the other hand, I also understand why it might be difficult for her to try to be confronted with that, because one of the most harmful things you can do, and this is not in a general sense, this is more in your personal life. If you go to therapy, for example, and you're trying to work on yourself and you're trying to better yourself, and then you have this family member who consistently comes up to you and says, but remember back when you used to be this terrible person, like, that's really harmful to your personal progress, because it obviously makes you feel like nothing you do is good enough and that this person just won't let it go. And it also kind of warps the way you see yourself. Obviously, if you're working on yourself, you're seeing yourself in a different light, and you're hoping that the people in your life see you the same. And I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people carried with them up until her most recent 2 videos, I would say. So let's get back to the Trisha and Colleen situation. So obviously Trisha was a huge troll for a lot of years. She's done a lot of really problematic content. She's done a lot of very weird content. I mean, her rendition of Shallows will forever be ingrained in my brain. I'm not able to listen to this song without thinking of her rendition, which was just chef's kiss. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. It's hilarious. But Trisha and Colleen had very, very recently started a podcast. They only had 3 episodes from what I can remember. And then obviously the whole scandal blew up and Trisha lost her as a friend. Trisha officially denounced her and said, I want nothing to do with her. But the problem is this is not the first time that this happened to Trisha. Now, I do have to say that the people who she was friends with before, I have my own very personal grievances with. So I'm not going to get deep into it, but I'm not going to lie and say that it didn't make me look at her in a certain way, because I was like, why? How can you be friends with these people? They show who they are on a consistent basis, and her just being so close with them. Obviously, they've both been canceled and she's moved on. But it's just been this situation where she consistently aligns herself with people that are very problematic. Now, one thing I did notice is that she has been consistently speaking out about them, only ever when it pertained to her. And that's one huge critique that I do want to mention. So when allegations came out, she was really ride or die for these people and really stood behind them, regardless of what was being said about them. But the minute it turned back around on her and she found out that there was some stuff said about her or done to her, she was very quick to distance herself from them. She has stated before that she is an ally and she stands with victims, but I think that should extend outside of yourself. Like, you should be able to have enough empathy for others to at least criticize the people that are in your life if what they have done has been this severe. We're not talking about like just shit talking. We're talking about trying to take people's careers down, even if what was used was justified. The way that it went down was very questionable in my opinion. Having people wanting to take their lives, like, it was just very severe. And then obviously the child thing, like, all of those things are very, they're not drama, they're crimes, and they're just very, very serious topics that I think even if it's your friend, you should be able to stand up and say, this is not okay. I've addressed this in a clean video. A lot of her friends were very quiet. Trisha was the only one who spoke out except for Kendall Ray, but I do commend her for speaking out after the fact and being very vocal and clear and saying this is not okay. Now, when it comes to Trisha's own scandals, there were a host of things that she has said and done. From what I understand, they were, I'm probably gonna have to blur it out. I might just put it on the screen like, she was mocking religions, she was mocking cultures. There were some accusations, or quite a bit of accusations of in varying degrees. Even with her most recent relationship, there were some accusations. I know that Trisha has a host of diagnoses when it comes to mental health issues, so I do understand them being a catalyst or a trigger for it, but they're not an excuse. And I know this is a little bit of a hot topic, especially if you are someone like Trisha who has the money and the ability to get all the help in the world, literally have all the resources one human can imagine available to them, is definitely something that I don't think we should let slide. And sometimes if we are in a situation where we can't control ourselves, we at least need to understand and realize that we do have the ability most of the time to at least remove ourselves. Trisha has a huge house, for example. She has a lot of people that she says she's close to, she can talk to. She has a really good, steady support system, regardless of how problematic it might be. She still has her family, like her sister. She had, her husband's family for a while. So there were people who were really kind and compassionate and empathetic towards her, who really welcomed her with open arms. I think when it comes to mental health in general, Trisha was one of the most fortunate people when it came to seeking help or seeking resources. There's a lot of people who suffer, and I don't want to compare this, but there's a lot of people who suffer from the same things or different things, worse things maybe, that don't have the ability to get the help and the resources. And they still have to manage in everyday life and make sure that the relationships that they have are healthy, while also holding down a job, while not making hundreds and thousands of dollars every month by filming their meltdowns on a kitchen floor and putting them on YouTube. So we have to put that into perspective. It doesn't negate what she's going through, and it doesn't negate her issues and her struggles, but we do have to put it into perspective in a more general sense that maybe we shouldn't be so quick to give her a hall pass on anything and everything that she has done. Because I do think some of her scandals, where certain things were addressed or certain things were explained or embellished in a way that didn't need to be embellished, were done for monetary gains more so than maybe educating or being an ally or part of a community or anything of that sort. But that's just my personal opinion. Also, if I haven't said this before, everything in this video is alleged in my personal opinion. I'm doing an analysis based on what I see and what I feel, so come to your own conclusion, make up your own mind. But let's get to the first thing. So one of the patterns that we see in Trisha's life all the time is her losing valuable relationships in her life, for first and foremost friendships. Now, she actually said in her most recent video where she addressed that she's embarrassed that there's no podcast anymore, which, by the way, she doesn't have to be embarrassed. This wasn't really any of her doing. She said that she feels that she may be at fault, or the reason or the trigger why all of those things are happening to her, and she's losing all of those friendships. When it comes to, and I'm talking about this from a psychology standpoint, by the way, I'm not going to go deep into like manifestation or anything like that, only because it's the same thing. I've said this before. So let's just objectively take a look at that. Let's turn it around and say Trisha was at fault for every relationship that fell apart on her. Where exactly can we hook into the fact that she's at fault? It's not necessarily always her doing something. Like 99% of the time, she actually wasn't the initiating trigger, that she did something and then her friendships fell apart. More often than not, it was her finding out that people have done something to her or have triggered her in a way where they were rude or condescending or disrespectful or just mocking her, which then led her to not exactly walk away quietly. Like, I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that she did tear those relationships to shreds after the fact, but where does that come from? Every relationship, friendship, we're just talking about friendships here, relationships we're going to get to later. Every friendship that you can look at objectively that Trisha has had is a direct reflection of how she has stated friendships have gone for her in childhood. She always felt like she was the fat one. She was the weird one. She was this. She was that. People would be friends with her, but would always mock her. She would make up all these stories so people would like her, but she knew instinctively that making up those stories wasn't exactly going to result in having genuine actual friendships. People just wanted to be friends with her because she had these elaborate things happen to her, but they still saw her as the fat weird kid or the fat ugly kid or the kid or whatever she said that they saw her as. She was trying to build relationships with older people in her life, which obviously also, apart from the fact that this was an incredibly unhealthy dynamic, was a difficult dynamic because she was even stereotyped and in those ways, and teachers would call her names. So every relationship that Trisha has had in her life when it comes to friends has followed the exact same pattern. Now, I've said this in videos before about self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, you can also tie this down to manifestation. Where does that come from? We all have a subconscious and a conscious. Our conscious is the one that we're using, to do certain tasks and things that we're trying to learn or things we have to concentrate. Everything else runs through the subconscious, and the subconscious is the one that stores our assumptions and our view of the world, and basically is our blueprint to how, not just how we navigate toward the world, but how our world is actually being set up. So since she was very young, Trisha had this mindset, given the experience that she's had her entire life, that people would be friends with her, but it would only be conditional as long as she was able to provide something to them, whether that be stories, gifts, whatever the case may be, and that sooner or later, the shoe, however, would drop for her, and people would talk about her and see her for who she really is. Now remember, this is not necessarily saying that this is how Trisha feels about her, but she has said before that she thought that she would be happier and that she would be more well-liked if she were thinner. So the people in her life are reflecting back her own insecurities. Again, that's also a subconscious belief. It's a subconscious programmed system that you have within yourself, where she feels that if she were skinnier, people would actually like her for who she is. Now, obviously, that's not the case. I mean, she said before that she's struggled with weight loss. Again, that is also a subconscious, programmed, conditioned belief. Some people think that they don't have to eat anything and they lose weight. Some people eat all day and lose weight. It really depends on what you believe in, where your mindset is at. And I think that she's someone who, from what I've seen and from what I understand, always felt that she had to diet really hard, she had to exercise really hard, but the results that she got were minimal because in her mind, she was always heavy and probably assumed that, and this is the thing, a lot of people who went through trauma oftentimes have this thought of, well, if I'm heavier, and especially if this comes to like sexual trauma, they will think, well, if I'm undesirable, I'm unattractive, or I'm heavier, people will not look at me this way and I am less at risk of being a victim. So I do think that her holding on to this weight might be like a safety blanket for her and might be a way to try and protect herself and her inner child from having to go through those experiences again. So that's definitely something I think she needs to look into and she needs to think about. And I think she's beautiful either way. But everybody in her life is reflecting back to her that she is not good enough exactly the way she is, which you can then tie back to her YouTube career. Why did she go out of her way to be this troll and to make this very questionable content, to be this troll and to really upset people, to get them to talk, whether it was positive or negative, didn't really matter. As long as people were talking about her, she was happy instead of just being herself. And even with her newer relationship and the podcast that she had with H3H3, I think you can see her embellishing stories and putting on a show a little bit while also trying to dip her foot in the pool and kind of see whether people would actually be more accepting of her the way she is or not, to see how that would go over. And I think that when that podcast fell apart, that was a huge setback for her for a while, which really only turned around after she had her child. And I think it probably would have been able to turn around a lot sooner had this situation not happened, at least not the way in which it was portrayed, because her old programming took place and she fell right back into that I have to make 20 videos and I have to defend myself and this, that, and the other. And then, you know, people went back and forth and all of this, people are talking about me and they're saying untruths and now I want to fire everybody. And, you know, all of those things where she consistently feels like she has to defend the person that she is while essentially defending a persona that she created to hide who she is. However, I actually feel sorry for her because I think she's constantly in a double standard mindset where she doesn't even truly know who she is, not necessarily because of the things that she suffers from, but because she's consistently trying to find that one role that she has that will finally give her the peace that she was seeking within herself. That explains why she was always playing dress up and doing cosplays and all of that. She would see people on TV who had characteristics that she wanted to embody, oftentimes people who were popular, who were well liked for who they were, and people who just knew who they were, and not understanding that the person that she is good enough exactly the way she is if she just allowed herself to be her own self. So this is technically a twofold situation. Yes, the people who talked about her are 100% at fault, obviously, for talking about her and doing those things, but they are just a mirror of how she sees the world and how she sees friendship. So if she was ready to actually have genuine better friendships in her life, she would highly, highly benefit from retraining that subconscious belief that people don't like her for who she is and that, you know, friendships are difficult and friendships will always fall apart because she will always be wrong somehow. That's actually a very easy belief to replace. By the way, if you don't know this, so the way you replace subconscious beliefs is you take a few affirmations that you can write down yourself and you just repeat them to yourself over and over again. Because remember, everything that Trisha has gone through, she has repeatedly and consistently heard throughout her life. She was never good enough. She never fit in anyway. Your subconscious really just takes on whatever you tell it to. It interprets things that you're going through based on the way that you think about them. So two people can have the exact same experience, but create completely different subconscious beliefs based on how they interpret the situation and how they think about the situation, because your subconscious does not have eyes, so it doesn't look at an experience and interprets it. It only hears what you tell it through the way you think and speak about a situation, and then which it then files under either different experiences or different assumptions and puts together this picture of how you act, you talk, you consistently think, also in the way your entire world shapes itself and represents itself around you. Now, another thing I think that we need to address are her personal relationships, and it's very obvious that, I mean, she said this before, that she's always wanted to get married, she's always wanted to have kids. In the past, the people that she has dated, I don't think we're really ready to give that to her. This is the thing, like, it is so obvious that she was consistently seeking out people who were in a place in their life where they were not ready to give to her what she wanted or willing to give to her, which is totally fine, by the way, like, you don't have to do that. But it was almost like this self-punishing and self-sabotaging behavior of choosing people who she tried to build this future with that they maybe weren't ready for or they had no intention of doing, and then giving her an excuse to punish them and to flip out on them because she really wasn't ready to work on her own issues. It was more like trying to find reasons to live it out and then say, well, can you blame me? Because look how they treated me. Apart from the fact that it made really good content, which again, you can make up your own opinion about how you feel about her exploiting her entire life online. But her ultimate goal always was to have this family. And I mean, she said before that she really likes Jewish guys. I don't know if any of the people that she dated prior were actually Jewish or not, but if you, for example, have this idea that, let's take her example, you only want to date Jewish guys, but then you date Christian guys only, obviously this is not in line with what you've consistently told your brain is your perfect partner. So your brain is going to put you in situations, subconsciously again, where you are not going to be with a perfect partner. Things are going to be difficult because remember, they don't fit the programming that you fed your brain you require in order to have your perfect little family unit that you've wanted. So you do need to be very careful with how you speak to your brain and what you say to other people, just the way you think in general. Oftentimes, it's stuff that's ingrained in us from the outside world. It's not even our own beliefs. So don't think that if something happens to you that you don't like, that you need to blame yourself. I don't condone victim blaming at all, because it's not your fault. You have to understand that it's not your fault. It's more important for you to understand that this is a thing. This is science. You can change it. You can learn about it. And you can take responsibility for your own brain process by taking control of it, without feeling like I should have been able to do this sooner when you had no way of knowing or no ability of doing that before. So obviously fast forward a couple years, she meets Moses and they're obviously now happily married. They have their beautiful baby girl, Malibu Barbie. And this is probably why you now see a change in her. People think that it was her having the baby, the baby was the catalyst for her changing. But there's a lot of people who go through things and then they have children and they don't change. So I do think it's important to give credit where credit is due, that Trisha changed because she had this ingrained belief in herself that once she had her baby and once she became a mom, she was finally able to be at peace in a way where she didn't need a troll, she didn't need to do all these kitchen videos, she didn't need to fight with her partner, she didn't need to do all of those things that consistently punished herself while giving her an adrenaline rush while making her money on top of that, but that being a wife and a mommy is now what is actually fulfilling her. Again, this is also a belief. Trisha could have had everything she wanted, A, way earlier, and B, much more easier, even without Moses and Malibu, had she worked on the way she saw things, because obviously you can see the friendship situation still hasn't changed. We're still in the same cycle because having a child does not alleviate all the negative programming you have about friendships in your life. So especially when it came to the Colleen situation, we saw her sit down and be really calm, and you could tell that I think for the very first time in a long time, she was actually addressing the things that hurt her in a very rational way, in a very conscious way, and she was discussing them in a way that made you feel like you're actually talking to somebody who is working through their trauma versus trying to push it down and having all these meltdowns. Because oftentimes, especially the kind of meltdowns that she had, they're about not facing your pain. It's easier to blame somebody else and to, go into this rage and then come out of it. And I know Trisha usually blamed herself for the rage-filled episode, but she didn't really acknowledge, really truly acknowledge what part she played in that situation, because at the end of the day, she blamed everybody else. And having a meltdown like this is obviously a good way to deflect any responsibility that you have, because yes, you were maybe involved, but now you're so hurt, you're having this incredible meltdown, so how can anybody blame you? So even though I do think that in her situation, becoming a mom and becoming a wife does coincide with her being calmer, we have to understand that her subconscious belief is directly responsible for that. If she had the belief, for example, that becoming a wife and a mom has no impact on her, but her turning, I don't know how old she is right now, but let's say her turning 40 was going to be the trigger for her to become calm and to actually work through her trauma in a more healthy way, that would have also came true. We still would have seen kitchen floor yelling into the camera, being tearing Colleen to shreds, Trisha, had she had that belief versus the one that she does hold currently, where being a mom and being a wife and holding yourself in a way where you not maybe embarrass yourself and your child, but also do yourself the favor of going to therapy and doing things the correct way so you don't carry on generational trauma to your child, so that they have a better chance growing up in a more healthy, stable environment than you had. And there's a lot of people who don't do that, so I think this is definitely something that she should absolutely be praised for, and I think she definitely has taken a lot of steps to better herself. And you have to understand that going to therapy is the same as manifestation. It's just retraining your subconscious beliefs, where with manifestation you usually do it yourself or through a coach, where in therapy you obviously have someone helping you. But even when you go to therapy and your therapist is telling you something, that is really helpful and vital to your growth, you still have to apply that new thinking to your everyday life. Otherwise, you will forever be stuck in this loop of your therapist gives you advice, you understand it and you accept it, but then you go home, do the same stuff all over again, think the same stuff, and then you go back to therapy and the cycle starts. Like, you obviously want to break out of that cycle and go to therapy in a way where it actually benefits you, versus you're just going to go and to vent, but nothing in your personal life actually changes. And I think this is a very beautiful display of how doing the work on yourself can have these amazing results, because you can see that whether it was through religion or through therapy or whatever it is that she applied, she actually used it in her real life. She actually did the work to get from point A to point B. And even if you're going the route of medication, you have to understand that medication will only take you so far. It can help you get into a better space, but if you want to, make things change consistently, you still have to work with your subconscious programming. I mean, I think Trisha cycled through a lot of medication in her life, just like you will have one medication that helps one person while it doesn't help somebody else, which, by the way, is a placebo effect 99% of the time. I know people who can take aspirin and ibuprofen and they say it doesn't do anything for them. Whether it actually does something physiologically for them, I obviously can't say, but there's been a lot of studies done on placebos, by the way, so you can look them up if you want to know more about that. But I think the ultimate goal should always be to, whether that's through medication, whether that's through therapy, really get yourself to a place where your new mindset is completely self-sustained without any outside forces. Like, you don't want to put too much emphasis and importance on something outside of you. It should always be a vehicle to get you to a place where you feel good enough to retrain your subconscious mind, because at the end of the day, it can fix anything and everything. And it's such a vital, important part when you're also talking about generational trauma, which obviously Trisha tried to break the pattern or broke the pattern, whatever the case may be. You have to understand that children from ages, well, even before they are born, I think 5 months conceived, so 5 months in utero, to about 5 to 7 years old, their subconscious is a sponge. So everything they see around them, everything they take in, everything that's being told to them, everything that is expected of them develops during that time. So if you are in a family where a lot of these negative behaviors are being displayed, your brain accepts them as their normal and as fact. And then you go through your whole life trying to figure out, why did this happen to me? And how can I fix it? And how can I make sure that I don't pass it on, when, again, the responsibility technically was on your parents. We are not being taught these things in school, which is a crime, in my opinion. We should all know about this. This is not... I saw someone the other day who said, I have the secret, right? I mean, it's like a nudge to the law of attraction, even though the law of attraction isn't a thing. I have the manifestation secret, and I'm going to tell you how this works. When this is something that has been explained a million times before, it's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret, and it shouldn't be gatekept, because every human manifests. Like, your thought process is what is considered manifestation. If you're thinking about something long enough, it comes into your reality. That's just how things work. So there's nothing to be gatekept here. There's nothing to be made a secret of. And everybody who does to make money, I personally find it abhorrent, but that's just me. So everybody has the right to know this, and I do think that Trisha actually dabbled into this a little bit, and from what I remember, shortly before all of her situations kind of improved, she started doing things like meditation, which, by the way, you don't have to do, but I think she was already on her spiritual path a little bit, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we see her evolving in this way, parallel to her finding her spirituality in a way that she might not have been in touch with prior to all of that happening. So a lot of people tie manifestation to spirituality and retraining your subconscious to spirituality, when in fact it's just psychology. It's just the nature of how the brain works. And if you are someone who is like Trisha and who is in the same situation, who is maybe trying to find, their perfect partner, or who wants kids, or is currently struggling through mental health issues, and you want to get out on the other side of it, really all you have to do is think about what it is that you actually want. Really think about it. Take society out of it. Take your parents out of it. Take anybody and everybody in your life who's ever had an opinion about anything completely out of it. What is it that you want for your life? You can, and it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. You can always change, but what is it that you really want that would make you feel like you're living a fulfilled and content life. And then I would recommend you actually write it down. You can write it into a little story, or you can just write sentences and affirmations like a to-do list. It's really up to you. And then keep reading it to yourself. Keep reminding yourself of the fact that you have the ability to have that. Who's to stop you from having exactly what it is that you want? The only person that's stopping you is yourself. You're stopping yourself by not retraining your brain in a way that is actually very easy to do. You just need to repeat to yourself what it is that you actually want, and not look at the outside, and consistently remind yourself through thoughts that everything is not the way you want it to be. And this is one thing that Trisha did with her videos and her constantly talking about it and tweeting about it. She was consistently holding this old reality in place that she didn't want, that made her unhappy, by talking about it in a very emotional and upset manner, which made her get stuck in this feedback loop of, she's thinking about something, she's expecting something, it happens, then she makes a video about it, then she gets upset, and all of this is like reiterated over and over again to her brain. Is like, oh yeah, right, that's what we're actually seeing, and that's what we need to recreate. And then her brain is recreating that situation, and it goes over and over again, which is why her old relationships were these cycles that she went through that felt like she couldn't get out of. Which can also pertain to your situation. If you are in a relationship that you deem toxic, or where you feel like you're being mistreated, or things are just going in circles and you can't really find a way out of it, there's this thing where people say you can't change somebody else, you can only change yourself. But the funny thing about this is, it's true. Technically it's true. However, the minute you change yourself, again, your subconscious controls how you act and how you speak and how you do things. The minute you change yourself, you change the other person though. That's how it works. That's spiritual law, if you want to call it that. But that is how the cycle goes. So you can't change somebody else by trying to nag, by trying to have conversations, by trying to have arguments. You can try that. If this is someone who you can talk to and they actually listen to your advice, go for it. All the more power to you. But more times than not, we find ourselves in situations where we're repeating the same thing over and over and over again, and nothing is changing, because we're trying to change an outside circumstance that is controlled by our subconscious, who has a different belief system ingrained and is directly going against what we are trying to change on the outside of us. That can't work. So I've used this analogy before. You are basically trying to change the hardware that is outside of you, everything that's outside of you, while you're having a software problem. That doesn't work. Your software is what needs to change, and the hardware will change as a result of that. So the next time you're in a situation where you feel wronged, or you feel something isn't going the way you want it to, or you see a repeating pattern in your life that you really don't like, that you want to change, instead of trying to find an outside fix, or you're nagging, or you're doing this, that, and the other, I would encourage you to really dig deep and see, what am I actually telling myself? What is this belief that I hold? What are the assumptions that I'm feeding my brain over and over again? And you will find very quickly that they go directly in line with the situation that you don't want, and changing them and telling your brain, reprimanding it like a little child, saying, you know what? No, it's not right. And you change them and just repeat the new affirmations instead. Your surroundings will change so quickly. I can't even tell you. Like, it will change your entire life. There's nothing in your life you can't change or you can't influence this way. So I would highly encourage you to try it. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Let me know. I thank you so much for being here. Please make sure you like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and I will see you in the next video.